Part 123. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1221. They stopped before they could talk to Xiang Mingxiu about sharing the car, and Xiang Liuyi and Xiang Chang, who had been waiting at the door early, rushed up immediately. Did you pick it up? Did you pick it up? Without waiting for Lu Gui to put the horse stool, Bai Erlang jumped down, clapped his hands and said, I picked it up, it's in the car. Only then did Bai Shan and Man Bao lift the curtains and get out of the car. Xiang Chao turned his back to Ming Shui. Xiang Chang saw that he was dirty and didn't say anything, and his clothes were still stained with dry dark brown blood, and quickly said, I'm coming, I come. Xiang Chang memorized Xiang Mingxiu and was about to enter the door when he suddenly felt something was wrong. Lu Ye, we don't live here, so we carry it in and out again. Xiang Liu patted his head angrily and said, Fool, the second son just got out of the prison, can't you let Dr. Zhou help you to look at it? Hurry up and go in. Xiang Chang thought it was true, and hurriedly went in with Xiang Mingxiu on his back. Xiang Mingxiu. After they found out that the king of Yizhu was dead, Wu Lang and the others went back to the shop. After all, they were cooking, leaving early and returning late, so it was very inconvenient to go in and out of the two squares. That is to say, Zhou Lejun is in charge of the accounts, and it is not convenient for him to live with his uncles, brothers, so he still comes back to live every day. But she also moved out of Man Bao's room and went back to her previous room. Mrs. Lu also took the Zheng family back to Daliu Lane, and most of the family members dispersed at once, so the space seemed to be much more spacious. Xiang Chang carried Xiang Mingxiu to the backyard, and Mrs. Lu, who had also come to wait from Daliu Lane after receiving the news, quickly asked him to carry him to the guest room. It was originally the room where Friday Lang and Saturday Lang lived, and now there are still two beds in it. Mr. Zhuang glanced at their hair and clothes, then turned to Daji, who was watching the excitement, and said, let Auntie Rong cook some potions to wash their hair and bathe them. He was injured and didn't want to move, but Dagi, who was just watching the fun, silently took his orders. It only takes a lot of time to wash your hair and take a bath, Man Bao and Mrs. Lu said. Grandmother Lu, brother Xiang is fine, I just gave him a pulse, it's a little weak, just go back and make up, let's go back. Bai Shan also said, Grandma, it's getting dark, grandson will take you back. Mrs. Lu glanced at them, tapped Bai Shan's forehead, and left with a smile. Before leaving, she comforted Xiang Liuyi and made him feel at ease. Xiang Liuyi responded with a smile, turned around and waited outside the door. When the two finally washed their hair, took a shower and put on clean clothes, it was all dark. The kitchen was ready to eat, and everyone sat in the main room to eat. Xiang Liuyi glanced at Xiang Mingxiu, poured a glass of wine and toasted Mr. Zhuang, thanked Bai Shan, Zhou Man, and Bai Erlang for their help in this matter. He said that they felt sorry for Xiang Jiaming, but they will be driven by them in the future. We must go through fire and water, regardless of where we are. Mr. Zhuang smiled and said that he was serious to the sixth master. Bai Shan and the three also responded with tea instead of wine. Everyone had a happy meal, and then Man Bao gave Xiang Mingxiu a second look. After prescribing the prescription, she said that she would go to the pharmacy tomorrow to help retrieve all these medicines. No more running to the family. Then everyone went to sleep. The door was closed, and Xiang Liuyi and Xiang Chang could not leave, so they rested in the guest room in the front yard. Zhou Lejun and his sister-in-law talked for a while, then yawned and went back to sleep. Early the next morning, everyone went to school, went to work, and went to work. Xiang Mingxiu rarely slept deeply. When he fell asleep, the sun was shining on him through the window. After he opened his eyes, he was still a little dazed. Okay. It took me a while to remember where I was. On the bed opposite him, Xiang Chao still fell asleep with his mouth open. He got up from the bed, leaned on the bed and looked at the sunlight pouring in through the window. After a while, he stretched out his hand to catch it. Looking at the sunlight falling in his palm, he couldn't help but smile slightly at the corners of his mouth. Footsteps came from outside the window. "Aren't you awake yet?" Xiang Chang's voice sounded under the window. "No, you can hear fifth brother's snoring clearly through a wall." Xiang Mingxiu also glanced at Xiang Chao, who was sleeping on the opposite bed, smiled, and reached out and knocked on the window. The person outside the window paused, and then he heard eager footsteps, and the door opened shortly after. Man Bao is now seeing a doctor in Ji Shitang. When the seasons passed, the number of patients in the pharmacy decreased a lot, and the patients in hand were finished before they were done. Dr. Ding and Dr. Tao were a little earlier than her. Since the title of Man Bao's little genius doctor became famous in the capital, the patients who came to Ji Shitang to see a doctor no longer picked Dr. Ding and Dr. Tao to see them. The four doctors sitting in the hall saw almost the same patients every morning. Everyone has relatively loyal patients, such as Man Bao, and Aunt Do's grandnephew Shi Dalan only looked for Man Bao to see a doctor. His case is special. Although Man Bao never told Dr. Ding about his condition in detail, everyone sits in the same pharmacy and often discusses his condition together. Who can hide from the other? Therefore, as soon as the patient in hand was finished, the doctors gathered together to talk in idleness. Dr. Ding saw that Mr. Man Bao hadn't come out of the consultation room, so he lifted the curtain and probed in and asked, "What did you write?" Man Bao buried his head in writing and said, "I'm doing a case." She thought of something and raised her head to look at Dr. Ding. "Dr. Ding, are you really not interested in things like hamstrings?" Dr. Ding struggled for a while and then said, "I'm really not good at using knives. Although I really want to help you, I'm afraid that going there will be a disservice." Man Bao said, "It's okay, you can help him to take care of his body. I felt his pulse last night, and I feel that he is still a lot empty, so he needs to take good care of him. I won't be able to have surgery in the near future." Dr. Ding reminded, "Didn't you invite Imperial Physician Zheng?" Imperial Physician Zheng also invited several imperial physicians. "So many people are enough. If too many people go, they will disagree and accidentally offend several people." Physician. Man Bao frowned and thought about it, "But I'm not familiar with anyone other than Imperial Physician Zheng, and I don't know what they are good at." Dr. Ding coughed lightly, "You will know this by asking Imperial Physician Zheng. By the way, Dr. Zhou Xiao, why didn't your patient Shi Dalan come today? Logically, shouldn't he come for a follow-up consultation today?" It was only then that Man Bao remembered, "Yeah, he always came very early to see a doctor, why didn't he come today?" Dr. Ding glanced outside, saw that Dr. Tao and Dr. Gu were talking and didn't notice him, so he slipped in and asked in a low voice, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, he has been in treatment for 2 months, do you think there is a possibility that he will get better?" "How many?" Man Bao said, "I took his pulse last time, and felt that his kidneys were much stronger." See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1222. Man Bao looked at Dr. Ding suspiciously. "Dr. Ding, do you want to be treated too?" The smile on Dr. Ding's face was immediately put away, and he said sternly, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, don't dare to make such a joke. I just want to ask because I have such a patient in my hands." After saying this, he laughed again, leaned over, and said, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, your patient's medical case." Man Bao immediately covered his medical case with a face of righteousness. "No, how can the patient's privacy be leaked? No one is allowed to see it except shopkeeper Zheng Da. Dr. Ding, I don't usually see you taking other people's cases to ask for advice. Why are you being reserved now? Didn't he just want to confirm the pulse case? Even if you don't show it to him, he can guess most of it, okay?" While Dr. Ding was weighing whether to wrap it up again, the curtain was lifted, and Shi Dalan stuck his head in and saw Dr. Ding in the consultation room, slightly embarrassed. "Dr. Zhou, are you free now?" When Dr. Ding saw him, he straightened his waist immediately, and after a light cough, he stroked his beard, and said to Man Bao, "Dr. Zhou will be busy first." Man Bao nodded again and again, then waved to Shi Dalan and asked, "Why did you come so late this time?" Shi Dalan pulled his daughter-in-law in from the outside, with some expectation on his face, but a little embarrassed. "Dr. Zhou Xiao, can you show my daughter-in-law this time too?" Man Bao looked at Lu Niang, then looked at the expressions of the two, and vaguely guessed something, and immediately waved, "Come and see." Shi Dalan immediately helped Lu Niang to sit down at the table. Lu Niang was also a little uncomfortable, but she still stretched out her hand and explained to Man Bao in a low voice, "I think I have eaten my stomach, so I feel a little sick today, but my mother-in-law saw it and thought I was pregnant, so." Man Bao took her pulse and felt it for a long time, then she asked some more questions. After a while, she touched her forehead, and said to Shi Dalan, who was full of expectations, "You can reach out and see me." Shi Dalan was disappointed and asked, "It really hurts my stomach." Man Bao said, "The days are short, I can't see it for the time being, so I'll check your pulse first." Does this mean that pregnancy doesn't depend on a woman's pulse? What does it mean to feel his pulse? But Shi Dalan still stretched out his hand to feel her pulse. Man Bao felt his pulse and asked some questions. She thought for a while, then went to feel Lu Niang's pulse again, and after a while, she said to Shi Dalan, "Your condition is much better, but Lu Niang's pulse doesn't look like it. It's because I broke my stomach, and I didn't get the high pulse, maybe it's because my days are too short. Then is she pregnant?" Man Bao thought for a while, then got up and went to find Dr. Tao. Dr. Tao came over to feel Lu Niang's pulse, and after a while, rubbing his beard, he said slowly, no hurry, come and see in a 10-day, be careful during this time, Mo Tishong walk fast, and don't have the same room, let's go back." Now not only Shi Dalan and Lu Niang are impatient, but Man Bao is also impatient, but looking at the calm Dr. Tao, the two patients dare not rush. Man Bao thought for a while, changed a prescription for Shi Dalan, and said, "Whether you are pregnant or not, you must continue to take the medicine. This medicine is the last time to take it, so go ahead." As soon as the two of them left, Man Bao sat brightly opposite Dr. Tao and stared at him. Dr. Tao knew that she would definitely not be able to bear it, and smiled while stroking his beard. "Dr. Zhou Xiao, this doctor has to be more patient than a patient. In the future, just tell me directly, how likely is she to be Zimai?" Dr. Tao shook his head and said slowly, it's stubborn. He just didn't tell Man Bao. Man Bao pestered him for a long time before he let go. The days are still short, but from the perspective of the situation, it really looks like a slippery pulse. Don't be happy, in case she is depressed in her heart and has such a pulse, it's too short a time to be sure. Man Bao narrowed his eyes with a smile, and nodded again and again, "If you can be sure of 3 points, then I can calculate 6 points here, because Shi Dalan's situation is indeed much better." Dr. Tao raised his eyebrows high and said with a smile, "I just saw that Shi Dalan's face seemed to be a little red. Is his pulse a little impetuous?" "Is there?" Man Bao said, "I think his face is normal, and his pulse is solid." She pulled the pamphlet over and opened it to see Shi Dalan's pulse case. Dr. Tao probed slightly to take a look. Seeing that Man Bao didn't seem to care much, he took 2 steps forward and looked at her, "And by the way, let's discuss this case in depth." After the two doctors finished discussing, the 2 medicine boys had been shaking outside several times, and when they heard the sound seemed to stop, Xiao Xiao stuck her head in and said, "Dr. Tao, Dr. Zhou, your meals are fast. It's cold." Man Bao was startled, "Yeah, it's past noon." Just as Dr. Tao put all Shi Dalan's pulse case into his mind, he was satisfied. got up and said indifferently, "Yes, it's getting late, Dr. Zhou Xiao, let's go to dinner together." Man Bao hurriedly took the medicine box and said, "If you don't want to eat it, give it to Xiao Xiao to eat. I have to rush home. There are still patients at home." When Xiao Xiao heard this, she immediately went to the counter and brought the bundled medicine bag to Man Bao. "Dr. Zhou Xiao, this is the prescription you brought this morning." Man Bao took it and said to Xiao Xiao, "You will prepare some ointments this afternoon, and tomorrow we will go to Shuguo Gongfu." Xiao Xiao responded with a smile. Lu Gui had pulled the carriage and waited outside the pharmacy. Seeing that Man Bao had not come out, he thought she was suffering from a serious illness, so he sat on the carriage and dozed off. Man Bao went out of Ji Shitang and swept around, found their carriage and walked over to pat him. Lu Gui woke up and quickly put down the horse stool and let Man Bao get on the carriage. "Miss Man, Mr. Chen and Mr. Zhang are here. The family is here, and the family is busy now." "Man Bao, are they here to see Mr.?" Lu Gui smiled and said, "I came to see Mr. Zhuang, but I also came to see young Master Xiang, but young Master Xiang was not well, so he went back to the house to rest early." Man Bao had a bad premonition in his heart. Even if Xiang Mingxiu is not in good health, he still doesn't want the bright sunshine outside, especially the winter sunshine, which is warm, but very eager. The reason why he gave up the good sunshine and went back to lie down in the house was because he couldn't catch any of the stories that Mr. Zhang and the others were inquiring about. He didn't know how Bai Shan and the others arranged him, so he didn't dare to talk too much, for fear that if he missed it, he would make a mess for them, so he could only pretend to be sick and go back to the house to rest. Xiang Liu and Xiang Chang didn't know, and they were worried. When Man Bao returned, they were sitting in front of Xiang Mingxiu's bed and sighing. See you at 8 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1223. As soon as Man Bao came in with the medicine box, Xiang Liu immediately gave way, and Man Bao handed the medicine bag to Xiang Chang. "This is medicine for your son, this is ointment, it will be faster to wipe the wound." Xiang Chang wrote down them one by one, while Xiang Mingxiu was more concerned about his feet. He asked tentatively, "Miss Zhou mentioned that my hamstrings can be attached." "Man Baidao, I have already told the shopkeeper Zhengda and imperial physician Zheng. When he finds all the people, we will start the research. Your health foundation is not good, and you have to take care of your body before you can perform surgery." Xiang Mingxiu breathed a sigh of relief and smiled, "I'm sorry, Dr. Zhou Xiao." Lord Xiang Lu took the opportunity to ask for Xiang Mingxiu to stay here for medical treatment. The environment in the place they rented is far inferior to this one, let alone Zhou Man is still here. Man Bao didn't think there was anything, so he agreed as soon as he mentioned it. Later, the operation was really performed, and she had to watch it every day. Man Bao looked at Xiang Mingxiu, and then looked at his ankle. Although he was a little reluctant, he still asked Keek to scan his body data. Keek happily deducted a point and then scanned it. Man Bao decided to enter the data into the anthropomorphic model after having a meal and rest for a while, and first check the effect of the operation on him. Man Bao's current points are a bit miserable, mainly because he was stabbed and fell into the water before. Keek bought them 2 breathing things to save them, and now the things are still in the system space. Because the technology of things is much higher than this era, so many points are deducted. Through this incident, Man Bao also realized that her usual savings are correct, and the points should not be spent indiscriminately, so that in critical moments, she can have enough points to buy life-saving things. Keek insisted that she was stingy, just like her father. Mr. Zhang and the others have already eaten, and they are sitting in the study with Mr. Zhuang drinking tea and chatting. Through the window, they can see Man Bao busy circling the yard. Even the meal is brought back to his room to eat. Still holding a book, he turned his head and sighed with Mr. Zhuang, I have also brought many disciples, but such self-disciplined disciples are rare, which is a wonderful blessing. Mr. Zhuang took a sip of tea with a smile and said a few words of modesty. Mr. Chen was a little curious, isn't your disciple's father posthumously appointed as Mianzhou shepherd, why did she still go to Ji Shitang to study medicine? Mr. Zhuang said calmly, she is a doctor, so she naturally wants to study medicine. I don't have much to teach her now. I teach her 3 texts every 10 days and give her some homework. Mr. Zhang casually flipped through the homework on the case in front of him, and became curious, is this homework from Bai Shan or Bai Erlang? Mr. Zhuang glanced at it and said, it's from Zhou Man. Mr. Zhang. Seeing that his expression was wrong, Mr. Chen also got up and looked curiously. Man Bao's calligraphy is very neat, and it is a regular script that is very suitable for examinations and writing, so Mr. Chen can read 10 lines at a glance. However, he did not read every line of sight and 10 lines, but read this policy theory carefully. After a while, he closed his class and sighed with Mr. Zhuang, such an article, it's a pity for her to study medicine. Mr. Zhuang, the virtue of saving the dying and helping the wounded, why is it a pity? Mr. Zhang also nodded, Brother Chen has a picture. Mr. Chen thought it was true, then put down the book, shook his head and said, I originally said that she should learn some female-read cooking skills, or piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting, now it seems that she has such a literary talent and knowledge, go to learn these are waste. Mr. Zhuang raised the corners of his mouth slightly. Mr. Zhang and Mr. Chen were not much interested in Xiang Mingxiu's legendary story at this moment. Instead, they remembered how Mr. Zhuang taught the 3 disciples. So the 3 gentlemen talked about the topic of education, and until Bai Shan and the others came back from school, they were still a little unfinished. Man Bao took out the treatment plan for Xiang Mingxiu after lunch, and got familiar with it first, then closed the doors and windows and went into the system to find an anthropomorphic model. Man Bao took the data from Keek and entered it into the anthropomorphic model system bit by bit. Watching various unhealed wounds appear on his body data began to drop, and his ankles became twisted. When everything was ready, Man Bao contacted Teacher Mo. Keek helped to send the video to Teacher Mo. Mr. Mo looked at the patient's data, and then looked at the lying anthropomorphic model. Man Bao said, his fracture time is too long, with your environment and drugs, even if the hamstrings are connected, later the effect of rehabilitation is probably not very satisfactory. Teacher Mo also restored the video to Man Bao. This is not difficult. Although it is not possible to connect the video face to face, the speed of video communication is also very fast. The teachers and students have long been accustomed to this way of communication. He took out a book from the bookshelf. Ever since Man Bao was imprisoned, he has been studying Xiang Mingxiu's case with her. The treatment plan he made based on various materials and the opinions of his colleagues has a rich experience. Book. As he opened it, he said to Man Bao, I told you that tendon rupture, oh, it is what you call hamstring, because of its limited regeneration ability, human beings did not overcome this problem until the middle of the 21st century. But it was only in the 22nd century that drugs were developed to keep tendons and ligaments active. Mr. Mo was still recording, and Man Bao took advantage of this time to open the toolbox. When Mr. Mo's video came over, she sat next to the anthropomorphic model with her chin supported. I conducted a reverse experiment with 2 colleagues, reversed the potion, and managed to synthesize a kind of ointment by combining the various medicinal materials you have, but I doubt whether it can be replicated with your existing technology. Although she was skeptical, Teacher Mo still told her about the medicinal materials and amount needed for the ointment, and the production process. A video is attached. Man Bao just clicked in and glanced at it and pushed it out. In the experiment in the video, Except for the medicinal materials on the plate, she had never seen anything in it. But since there are medicinal herbs, she decided to go back to study when she has time, and now. Manbao recorded a video and sent it over. I decided to use the knife to try it out first to see if I could connect the hamstrings. I will study how to make the ointment at night. Mr. Mo said that there is no problem. Anyway, the anthropomorphic model can be restored with one click after using it. As long as it is not hit by a devastating blow, such as being cut into pieces and completely disconnected, or being burned by fire, it can be restored with one click. Manbao asked Keek to record a video of her operation. When she looked back, she not only had to discuss it with teacher Mo, but she also wanted to see it herself. So Manbao flashed out the scalpel, with a squinting smile, looked at the ankle of the anthropomorphic model and cut the knife. See you at 10 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1224. Bai Shan almost smashed the door before calling Manbao out. As soon as she opened the door, she met everyone's worried eyes. Bai Shan also put away his fierce expression and immediately asked softly, "Manbao, what's the matter with you?" No wonder they were worried. It was getting dark now. Bai Shan and the others called Shen Zhen once after school, but she didn't answer, so Bai Shan went to do his homework by himself. After he finished his homework, he and Bai Erlang discussed Xiangjia's story with Xiang Mingxiu. Until it was time for dinner, she still wouldn't come out of the room. Bai Shan knocked on the door, but she still didn't answer. This happened before. According to her explanation several times afterwards, he thought she was addicted to that case or medical book again, so he didn't worry too much and let the kitchen help him. She set aside a meal to eat. After everyone had eaten and drank enough, they chatted for a while. Seeing that it was almost dark, the room must have been so dark that nothing could be seen, but Manbao still did not move. Everyone panicked, and Bai Shan came to knock on the door, almost smashing the door. Seeing Manbao's haggard face and red eyes, everyone couldn't help but think, "Are you crying?" Mr. Zhuang looked at her eyes carefully, and felt that it was not like crying, but rather red eyes. He glanced at the dim room behind her and frowned. "Even if you are addicted to books, you should turn on the lights. If you don't take care of your eyes, you won't be able to see them later." Manbao wanted to say that her eyes were not red because she was black, but because she had to get her hamstrings red. That thing was much harder to pick up than she thought. Like opening the abdomen, although the internal organs are also very dangerous, and there is a danger of massive bleeding at any time, but they are so big, and this time when the hamstrings are attached, she knows what blindness is. The anthropomorphic model is set based on Xiang Mingxiu's data, so the condition on its ankle is the same as Xiang Mingxiu's. Because he was brutally severed at the beginning, the cross-section was very messy. Not only the tendons and ligaments, but also the bones were injured, and the situation was very bad. Because the hamstring has been broken for a long time, the wound on the ankle has healed. The scar on the outside looks fine, but the inside is a mess. Don't talk about her when Manbao cut it. Teacher Mo, who received a video every 5 minutes, was stunned. He was shocked by the barbarity of the student's era, and sweated for her, and then persuaded, "You can't fix the situation, just give up." He even suggested, "It seems that the wound is healed, but there is actually water accumulation in it. Based on the existing data, this part of the bone is likely to be necrotic. In order not to affect the upper bone, the limb is finally amputated." Manbao was a little unhappy. It was the first time she had seen such a case when she grew up so big. How many people in this world have broken hamstrings? How many of those with broken hamstrings would meet her, and would they be willing to risk surgery on her when they met her? So she can't get it. Why did she give up? Manbao ignited a raging fighting spirit and dealt with the stagnant water first. Generally speaking, the second operation should be waited for the stagnant water condition to improve and the human body to digest itself. But this is an anthropomorphic model, so she rudely performed a second operation after confirming with teacher Mo that she had handled the stagnant water correctly. Man Bao was completely immersed in it. Not to mention his eyes, his neck was about to break. This operation took too long. She sat at the dining table and sighed softly as she ate. Mr. Zhuang went back to the house to rest after educating his disciples. The elderly couldn't stand the fear, so he had to use sleep to comfort himself. The Xiang family brothers also went back to the house. After many years, they can finally relax and stay in one place safely. Of course, it is necessary to take a good sleep. Zhou Lijun had a busy day, and seeing that her aunt was fine, she was just addicted to studying, so she felt relieved and went to bed. She has to go to the restaurant tomorrow morning. Bai Erlang went to continue his writing career, so at this time only Bai Shan was sitting opposite Man Bao. Seeing her sadness, he asked, "What are you worried about?" Man Bao sighed deeply again, "I have encountered a big problem." She looked out the door and said, "Xiang Mingxiu's hamstrings are not easy to connect." Bai Shan looked at her suspiciously, "Aren't you quite confident before? But I didn't expect the condition in his ankle to be so bad. I had a 40–50% certainty, but now, it really depends on the will of God. It also depends on whether she can put on the anthropomorphic model before he can take care of himself. Gain experience." Bai Shan thought of something, looked out, and asked in a low voice, "Did Uncle Joe find out something? Could he still see what's going on in his ankle?" Man Bao. She opened her mouth, but didn't tell him that Keek was not her biological father. She had never seen a ghost or something like that. Seeing that she didn't deny it, Bai Shan said with bright eyes, "Uncle Joe is really a weapon for you to study medicine. No wonder your medical skills have improved so quickly." He said that Man Bao was not convinced. "My medical skills have improved rapidly because I am smart, studious, and diligent. It has nothing to do with my uncle or my own father." Bai Shan glanced at her and said, "How can it be okay? You can see the condition of the patient's body through Uncle Joe. Isn't that the same as being able to see the lesions from time to time?" Man Bao thought about it too. This is really a convenience brought by Keek, but this is not something you can see all the time, and you have to pay a price. There are a lot of points for each scan. Bai Shan became nervous and asked, "What price? Is it bad for your body? Or is it bad for Uncle Joe's soul?" At the last sentence, he kept his voice as low as possible so that only the two of them could hear it. Man Bao shook his head sadly and said, "No, it's money." Bai Shan breathed a sigh of relief, "It's just money, what I thought it was. I won't earn it without us." Bai Shan thought for a while, then went back to the house and moved a box out. He opened it and showed it to Man Bao. It was heavy with yellow and orange gold, "Not a lot, just use it." Man Bao reached out and hugged the box, and said, "It was given to me. Isn't that bad? After all, no merit is not rewarded." "Bai Shan, I lent it to you." Man Bao put the box on the table. Bai Shan coughed lightly, looked left and right, and asked in a low voice, "Is Uncle Joe not here?" Man Bao opened his eyes and told the truth, "Not here, never been there." Bai Shan breathed a sigh of relief and whispered, "Isn't it easy for you to make money? Since Uncle Joe can find all kinds of exotic flowers and plants, you can ask him to find some precious flowers such as peony and bluegrass in the spring of next year. You will be able to make money, and you can use it first." Man Bao pushed back regretfully and said, "Forget it, I still have it now. People want points, not gold. But gold is also good." She is planning to collude with the little eunuch in the queen's palace who guards the flowers and plants in the past 2 days. "Oh, no, it's a friendly exchange. Let him accidentally break 1 or 2 plants while serving the flowers and plants. I will study it for her. Research. These all cost money. No way, she still pretends to be the little eunuch next to the prince when she enters the palace. Every time she goes to see her in the queen's palace, everyone else hides from a distance, and she never sees the Princess Mingda who once promised her flowers and plants. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1225. Bai Shan pushed the box back again and said generously, "Just take it if you give it to you." Seeing her tangled face, he could only blush slightly and said, "If you don't have it in the future, you can pay it back." Man Bao blinked at him. Bai Shan coughed lightly and said, "You help to see if your family members are sick, and you pay for the medicines. How can we figure it out so clearly? This is also to improve your medical skills. We will get sick in the future. You still have to look at it, this is the medical fee paid to you in advance." Man Bao's eyes fell and landed on his ankle. "I don't think you may need this medical technique." Bai Shan. He got up directly, "You take it, I'm going back to the house." Seeing that he was gone, Man Bao hugged the box, opened it and touched the gold inside, feeling very happy. She always felt that other people's gold was better to touch. After eating, Man Bao returned to the house with Jin Zi in his arms. After thinking about it, he entered the system to see the anthropomorphic model that had been sewn up by her. She did not restore it with one click, but kept it in a patient state to see the recovery effect. The effect, of course, it's not very good. After all, this operation is too rough. Man Bao went to click on the video commented by Mr. Mo. Mr. Mo is still busy, and the videos of the comments are also sent one by one, pointing out all the deficiencies in the process of Man Bao's operation. Man Bao took the notes and planned to improve it tomorrow. First of all, the problem of dealing with the water, and then the separation of the sticking tendons. Man Bao recorded them one by one, until the alarm clock she set went off and Keek reminded her to go to bed. She just left the system with no end in sight, and lay in bed for a long time, unable to fall asleep. This case is really interesting. It is probably the most difficult operation she has ever done. Sure enough, Teacher Mo is right, the more delicate the operation, the more difficult it will be. She couldn't fall asleep, so she went through today's surgery in combination with Teacher Mo's comments, and fell asleep before she could think about it completely. She was woken up by Bai Shan the next day. When she was dressed and her hair was disheveled, Bai Shan had already washed up and was about to take a book to read in the small garden. When she saw her, he said, "Let's wash up, it's almost time for breakfast." After she finished washing up, Bai Shan also came back with a text, and the three of them went out together after breakfast. Daji is still recovering from his injuries, so the task of picking them up falls on Lu Gui. Lu Gaixian took Man Bao to the door of Ji Shitang, and she jumped off the carriage and said to Lu Gui, "You don't have to pick me up at noon. I have to go to the doctor today, and Xiao Xiao will take me home." Lu Gui complied. Bai Shan lifted the curtain and said to her, "You have to be careful." Man Bao waved his hand, "You can rest assured. The king of Yazhu is dead, who will be against her? Queen Mother? Even if it was for the king of Xinqing County, she would not deal with her openly." Mr. Zhuang and them analyzed that if they had an accident in the capital, they would not only slap the face of the court and the emperor, but also make the Queen Mother and the King of Xinqing County fall. They are suspicious, so even if they may not be popular, no one dares to threaten their lives for a while. After Man Bao waited for the carriage to leave, he happily turned around and entered the Ji Shitang, and asked Xiao Xiao, "Didn't you say last time that you knew a guy who works in the carriage shop?" "To see." Xiao Xiao was taken aback and said, "Dr. Zhou Xiao is going to buy a horse? I thought you didn't buy it anymore." Man Bao had mentioned that he wanted to buy a horse a long time ago, but he never bought it. First, there were too many things. Second, they were all dangerous some time ago. Xiao Xiao stopped mentioning it after seeing that she had asked it once. He thought she would not buy it. Man Bao said, "We have to see if it is good, the main price has to be cheap." Xiao Xiao, Dr. Zhou Xiao, good horses are generally not cheap. Man Bao thought for a while and said, "It doesn't matter, just buy cheap ones, good or bad, as long as you can live." Coco. Keek couldn't help reminding her, "Host, the quality of the collected species will also affect the reward points." Man Bayadao, I remember you said when I was a child that the influence is very small. What you want more is the genes they carry, whether they are high quality or low quality, because they do not have a fixed standard for judgment, so this aspect is rewarded with points. Very few, I remember them all. Coco was silent. It was when the host was very young, and she went to the mountains to dig flowers and plants. Because she was not young enough and lacked strength, she had digged up flowers and plants several times. The things that were dug up were extremely wasteful, and they were thrown away. Sometimes Keek only found one or two such plants, and she even dug up all of them. It was really distressing, and he also asked her to be included in the system. This was the explanation given at the time, and although it was the truth, it thought it was a bit more consoling, but people just remembered it. Man Bao took the box given by Bai Shan. There was nothing she could do. She really ran out of gold. She still had more than 100 taels of silver left in her private house, so she had to keep it for emergency use. But the points in the system are also very important. Man Bao now feels that a male anthropomorphic model is not enough, because some diseases require a second operation, or even a third operation, which means that the operation observation time is required. So she had to have at least 2 models for the surgery to experiment with. The 2 models she has now, one male and one female, were given to her by teacher Mo out of her own pocket. She felt that it would be difficult to ask teacher Mo to pay for another 1 or 2, so she still had to earn points. It's a pity, Mr. Mo doesn't seem to be very interested in the things she has here. Except for the patient's data, he has almost no desires. Otherwise, she can exchange things with Mr. Mo. If you want to earn points to buy patients, you can't dig out the flowers and plants in the palace for the time being, so you can only pay for livestock. In addition to horses, there are cattle and sheep. However, Man Bao felt that horses were the most expensive, and Keek had also checked that horses should have the highest score at the moment, so in order not to attract attention, she decided to include a horse first. Because when you buy a cow, you have to go to the yamen to register, after you buy a horse, you can buy a sheep. Man Bao had a good plan. After eating at Ji Shitang at noon, he quickly went to Shuguo Gongfu, intending to make a quick decision and buy a horse when he came out. Mrs. Chen Er didn't expect Zhou Man to come to see her, so she hurriedly asked her to come in, and went to the second door to pick her up in person. Man Bao has been in and out of the residence several times, and it is the first time that Mrs. Chen has picked her up at the second gate. Mrs. Chen Er held Man Bao's hand and said with a smile, "I sent someone to Ji Shitang to invite you, but I thought you weren't coming." "I have a reply. I said that I came to the door today." "Why, didn't the second lady's servant tell you?" "I told you, but who knew that it was you who came?" "I thought you Ji Shitang would send a doctor to come." Mrs. Chen Er dragged her into the room and sat down, smiling. "I heard that you started 2 days ago. After returning to Ji Shitang to sit in the hall, are you planning to be a doctor all the time?" Man Bao nodded. "Haven't I always been a doctor?" Mrs. Chen Er looked at her puzzled expression and smiled. "Yes, it's ordinary people like us who think wrong. Come on, you can help me find out what's wrong with me. Buy it, buy it, buy it." See you at 4 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1226. Although Man Bao had been in prison, Mrs. Chen Er didn't stop taking the medicine and kept taking the medicine prescribed by Man Bao, so her condition was much better. After reading it, Man Bao said that the medicine can be stopped, and the next step should be to eat food, and walk around the garden 2 or 3 times a day. You can continue to use the ointment. I think the texture has faded a lot. Mrs. Chen Er also felt that her body was much better. At least she wouldn't suffer from back pain after just standing for a short time as before. Sitting was uncomfortable, and lying down was uncomfortable. Now her complexion is much better. Mrs. Chen Er happily invited Man Bao to drink tea, waved her hand to let the servants in the room step back and said, "Dr. Zhou, I have a few friends, and they all have some illnesses. I will invite them to come tomorrow, you come and help them take a look, okay?" Man Bao said with a smile, "I have a patient tomorrow afternoon. If it's not an emergency, Mrs. Chen can ask them to go to Ji Shitang to find me. The second floor of our Ji Shitang is very secret, so it can be seen by nobles." Seeing Mrs. Chen frowning, she added, "If there is something at home that is inconvenient to go, it's fine, let the servant go to Ji Shitang and say it, just leave a post, I will arrange the order later, and I will come to see the doctor." Mrs. Chen nodded with a smile, "Okay, by the way, did Dr. Zhou Xiaodao bring too much of this ointment this time? I sent someone to buy it at Ji Shitang earlier, and the shopkeeper said it was sold out." "Sold out?" Shan Bao blinked. Today, when she went to the backyard to eat, the shopkeeper was not only cooking a new pot, but the ones that had been boiled 2 days ago were also in jars, filling the medicine rack. Man Bao gave an ah and said, "Yes, many people bought this ointment, this time I ask Xiao Xiao to bring a jar." Mrs. Cheng said, "Why didn't Dr. Zhou bring a few more jars? There are several female dependents in my family, and this ointment can be used." Man Bao was a little embarrassed, "Then how many more jars will I bring you when I come to see Mrs. Chen next time?" Mrs. Chen nodded with a smile. Man Bao collected things to say goodbye. Mrs. Chen Er got up with a smile and sent her out, and asked, "It's still early, you really don't sit around anymore?" Man Bao refused and said, "I have to go to a carriage ride in a while, and then sit another day." "Cars and horses? Do you still want to buy a car?" "I want to buy a horse." Mrs. Chen Er nodded thoughtfully, sent Man Bao to the back of the second door and said with a smile, "Dr. Zhou, you and I are familiar with each other, I won't call you doctor in the future, how about calling you Sister Zhou? There is a cousin about the same age as you, and I will introduce you to me later." Man Bao responded with a smile, bid her farewell and left. Mrs. Chen Er watched her leave, and then held the girl's hand and turned around with a smile. The girl was puzzled. "Second madam, why are you so polite to Dr. Zhou Xiao all of a sudden?" Mrs. Cheng held her hand and said, "The identity is different. When Miss Zhou comes to the door in the future, you should be more polite." She sat on the couch, took the ointment left by Man Bao just now, looked at it and smiled. In the past, she was just a doctor, a genius doctor, we have to be more polite, but now, she is not only a genius doctor, but also a hero. The girl is a filial daughter who dares to avenge her father's revenge and go to the palace to file a lawsuit, so we have to respect it. She handed the ointment to the girl, asked her to put it away, leaned against the pillow and said, "Just watch, the Queen Mother is still here, and the case of the King of Yazoo has not been completely resolved, so no one will contact her at this time. After a few years, the Queen Mother is in the future, and the case is completely closed. Many people value and appreciate her. Jiashi, I don't know how many people think of her character and want to marry her back home, but it's a pity." Holding the ointment, the girl asked, "What a pity?" It's a pity that Hunghu's ambitions are different from those of ordinary people like me. Mrs. Chang smiled a little when she said this, but she suddenly remembered something and sighed. Forget it, what are you talking about, second master? Go again. Where is the goblin's house? Let him come back. I remember last time he grabbed a horse from my brother and came back. Where did he get the horse? The girl turned pale in shock. Second madam, you don't want to give a horse to Dr. Zhou, do you? Mrs. Chang gave her a sideways look and said, is there anything wrong with me? That horse is almost worth $1,000. I'm fine now. It just happens that the weather is good these days, so I can go to the horse farm to play polo. By the way, let's take a look at the horse farm. Find a good horse for Miss Zhou. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. Last time, the second master almost fought with the uncle because of this horse. If the second lady gave it away so easily, not only the second master would vomit blood, but the uncle would also vomit blood. Man Bao handed the medicine box to Xiao Xiao, climbed into the carriage and waited for the residence of Shuguo Gong. Xiao Xiao glanced at her sideways. Dr. Zhou Xiao, what's wrong with you? Man Bao sighed. I only deeply felt the world affairs and human feelings that Mr. said today, and I am still too tender. Xiao Xiao's heart lifted instantly, and she asked fearfully, Dr. Zhou Xiao, what happened to you and Mrs. Cheng are in the room? This is the one who dared to sue the imperial court at the Queen Mother's birthday banquet. Man Bao said, nothing happened. Don't you realize that this time we entered the residence of the Duke of the State and it was very different from the past? Xiao Xiao said as a matter of course, Dr. Zhou Xiao's identity is not the same as before. She lived in the countryside since she was a child, and the person with the most valuable status was the county magistrate. The three magistrates she happened to meet did not make Manbao feel the majesty of class, so she did not understand Xiao Xiao well. But Xiao Xiao lived in the world since she was a child and fell a brick. Among the 10 people who were hit, 2 were clansmen, 3 powerful and 3 officials. Of the remaining 2, 1 was a wealthy businessman, and 1 was a commoner like him. He understands this class stratification too well. Manbao is not Wuxia Aman, but she still feels a strong difference. In Qilai village, even in Lujiang County, doctors are still very respected. Even in Yazhu City, although the doctor's status is not as good as in Lujiang County and the village, it is still very important, but in the capital. Manbao thought of the imperial doctor who was slashed by the prince's sword and lay on the ground, and no one dared to save him for a long time, and asked in a low mood, is the status of the doctor very low? Xiao Xiao scratched her head, not understanding Manbao's words very well. Not low. Xiao Xiao's lifelong wish is to become a doctor. Man Baishun gave an encouraging sentence, if you study hard, you will surely succeed. Xiao Xiao grinned happily. Manbao was still thinking about the issue of status. It was strange that her relationship with Mrs. Cheng was a doctor-patient relationship, but before, she was polite to her, but now she respects her. But the respect is not because of her identity, but because her biological father was posthumously appointed as the state shepherd. Manbao decided to go home and ask Mr. But it doesn't matter now, the most important thing is that Xiao Xiao stopped the car, and Manbao smelled the smell of the carriages. When he looked up, he saw all kinds of livestock tied up in the market, and all kinds of familiar and unfamiliar smells hit his face. Come. See you at 8 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1227. Xiao Xiao put the carriage in the place where the carriage and horses were specially guarded at the entrance of the carriage and horses, and then led Manbao in. Although the carriage and horse shop is called the carriage and horse shop, most of the cars sold are scooters, and there are only a few well-made blue cloth carriages, which are very simple. Because good carriages are made to order, who has nothing to do to make a luxury cart and sell it in a shop? What if I can't sell it? In addition, the rest of the place is to buy livestock. Horses, cows, donkeys, mules, and even peacocks sent from the south. When Manbao passed by, he heard a clear chirping sound, and then the peacock opened its screen, shining like jade in the sky. Manbao stared blankly for a while, and immediately can't walk anymore. Xiao Xiao was also stunned, and shouted, "You are so beautiful, Dr. Zhou Xiao, you are so lucky. This peacock has been here for a long time, but he just doesn't like opening the screen. No matter how funny people were before, it didn't work, so you just left. When I came over, it turned on. Not only did it open the screen, but it also screamed at Manbao with its head tilted, then shook its big tail screen and circled half a circle in front of Manbao, showing its beauty in all directions. Manbao was immediately fascinated. Standing in front of the railing, he looked at the peacock and asked, "How much is this?" Xiao Xiao was startled and quickly grabbed Manbao. "Dr. Zhou Xiao, we can't afford this." Because the passers-by who came to watch the peacock opened its screen and glanced at the clothes on Manbao, they didn't think Manbao could afford it. The steward leaning on the railing and guarding the peacock didn't mean to look down on Manbao, and said with a smile, "Little lady wants to buy it." Manbao nodded again, and Keek tried his best not to make a sound to disturb her, and began to calculate quietly, based on the host's past performance, how likely it was that she would record this. The steward smiled and said, "My peacock is green jade, the most precious kind, so I won't sell it for money. It's rare, and naturally, it's only rare." Manbao began to pick up the things in the mall, her eyes sparkling. She likes to exchange rare for rare. The steward has already continued. For example, Yanton, Kaka, or a parental official in a locality can be a general. "Manbao, is this a rare thing?" Guanxi said, "A rare thing is naturally a rare thing." Manbao said angrily, "Then you might as well say that this is for the emperor, and officials can't buy or sell. Who else can give it to you except him? The emperor already has 2 peacocks. Although mine is not bad, it's not unusual for him. I'm afraid I won't be able to ask for an official." The steward smiled, "The little lady has no official but Yanton or Kaka. It's okay, my peacock was transported here from the Heman ministry. During the period, it has crossed thousands of mountains and rivers, and countless difficulties and dangers. I can guarantee that not only the capital city, but also the entire Central Plains, except for the 2 in the palace, and the others. There is no peacock more brilliant." Manbao thought to himself, "Don't say she doesn't have those things, even if she does, she can't change it with him." Seeing Manbao's attitude, Keek couldn't help whispering in her mind, "Change it, this is worth more points than a horse." Speaking of horses, Manbao finally thinks of horses. She reluctantly looked away from the peacock and left with a look of regret. By the way, she comforted Keek in her heart, "We don't have salt, let alone water, and it's impossible to give. He is an official. Keek, host, you should work hard and ask about the price." Manbao thought so too, so he said to the steward, "Then what if we have to buy it with money? How much is it worth?" Obviously, there are many people who ask this question. The manager is used to it and smiles, "I don't want money, but I want 100 boats full of grain." Manbao asked humbly, "How much food is in a boat?" "A water boat is usually 1,000 stones." When Manbao heard this, he immediately saluted, "Excuse me." Then he turned around and walked away. His heart was already cracking the bill, and he replied to Keek, "Have you heard, 1,000 stones, 100 ships is 100,000 stones, and now I don't know what the price of grain in the capital is, but 1 stone should be, it won't be less than 150 cents, and the 100,000 stone of grain can't be bought, let's count the money." Manbao turned his head and asked Xiao Xiao, "How do you sell millet in the capital now?" Xiao Xiao replied with a bewildered face, "Last time I went to buy it at my house, it seemed that it was 18 wen a do." At this moment, Manbao still has time to sigh, prices in the capital are higher than those in our small places. Then he said to Keek in his head, did you hear that, 18 wen, that one stone is 180 wen. 100,000 she of grain can supply the army to set off, where can I buy so much grain? Keek only regretted it for a while. Anyway, the host has released precious species that he has seen over the years, but he still reminded him, do you want the host to go to the barbarian department in the future? Man Bao had studied geography with Mr. Zhuang, and yearned for the legendary places with high mountains and steep mountains, so he nodded and said, I will go when I grow up and become more skilled. I heard that there are many poisonous insects and miasma, and it is not easy to pass. So you still have to study medical skills well, so you still have to earn points to buy patients. Very good, back to the original point. Man Bao and Xiao Xiao went to find his friend. His friends are guys who work in the carriage and horse shop, and they are very warmly received. Because it was introduced by Xiao Xiao, he first took Man Bao to see the best horse he thought, and then talked about the horse's teeth. When it comes to the horse's hooves, everyone tells Man Bao that these horses are very good horses. So, Dr. Zhou, do you want to have good endurance, run fast, or be gentle? These horses were all well groomed, their hair was well groomed, and they ate the best soybean meal, especially one of the horses, which was brown and red, was really beautiful. So beautiful that Man Bao couldn't help hugging its neck. This horse is not big, only 2 years old. It is suitable for a young man like Man Bao. He slowly raises and cultivates feelings, and he will become an adult in a year. The horse also seemed to like Man Bao very much, so he cupped her hand. Man Bao was even more reluctant and asked, how much is this horse? The man immediately smiled and rolled his eyes, and said, Dr. Zhou is really good at seeing. The parents of this horse are both famous horses. They can run in the races, and they run very fast. If Dr. Zhou wants it, we will only take them here. 28 gold. That's not cheap either. Man Bao calculated the money in his pocket, thinking that the day after tomorrow he was going to enter the palace and conspire with the little eunuch to buy some flowers and plants, so he reluctantly said, then which is the cheapest horse here? The man was stunned for a moment and said, if Dr. Zhou thinks this one is too expensive, why don't you take a look at this one? It's not too bad, it only needs 23 gold. Man Bao only glanced at it and shook his head, no, I want the cheapest in the whole store. Buddy and little peony. Finally, the guy took Man Bao to the backyard and showed her 2 wilted old horses and 3 ponies in the stable. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1228. The man said, Dr. Zhou, don't think that these 2 horses are old, but they are very stable in pulling things, and they are not very old. They are only 23 years old, and they should be able to live for about 10 years. As the saying goes, let the old horse know the way, let's go. Man Bao took a look, and finally turned his gaze to the pony aside under Keek's strong opposition. When the man saw it, he sighed, Dr. Zhou, this pony is not very good. You can see that its hooves and teeth are somewhat flawed, but don't worry, their parents are good horses, and their brothers and sisters are also good. If you want to buy it, there is still a good chance of a good horse after breeding. Xiao Xiao glared at the man. Well, the guy also thinks that he can't take too much on the customers brought by his friends, and he knows that this genius Dr. Zhou is the master of his friend, and Xiao Xiao will follow her to study medicine for a long time in the future. So he looked around and saw that the other guys in the yard didn't pay much attention to this side, so he lowered his voice and said, Dr. Zhou, it's not me, if you really want to buy a horse, then buy an old horse, no matter how old they are, they can be used as soon as they are bought, and they are durable and the price is not very expensive. I can give you the lowest price I decide, 28 taels. This pony is different. He is young and seems to be able to live another 30 years, but this horse is not in good condition. Not to mention whether it can be used in the future or not, whether you can support it or not is not certain. Manbao asked Keek, can you feed yourself? Keek is not a laboratory person, so he has no problem with the host spending a small amount of money to buy inferior horses. So it scanned back and forth between several horses and finally settled on a pony with the best genetics. Buy it? Manbao immediately pointed to the smallest horse and asked with frowning eyes, how much is this horse? The man saw that it was a foal less than 2 months old. This horse was not very lucky when it was born. Its mother had a difficult childbirth, so I kicked its eyes in the confusion after birth, and its eyes were gone. It's a little bad, and it's thin, and it should have been dealt with at the race course. But his boss was reluctant. He felt that it would also be some income to feed and sell it to the countryman to pull the car, so he sent it to the shop. He smiled and said, at this young age, only 12 taels are needed. Manbao's eyes narrowed with joy, and he waved, that's it? She said, the price of this horse is also too different. I thought it would cost more than 100 taels. The man didn't mind the low price, he explained to Manbao with a smile, it depends on what kind of horse it is. Generally a horse with a size of 50 taels can be used in the battlefield, and a horse with a size of 100 taels is a good horse. Don't look at it. The horses we put outside the shop are expensive, but in fact, the better horses are in the stables, and some good horses, especially stallions, are worth thousands of dollars. Manbao rolled his eyes and asked, what about the peacock at Bifangkao? The man said proudly, how can you compare that? The peacock is used to sea, but the maxima is hard to find. He can ask for 100 ships with a single peacock. Our boss said that there was an emperor in the past. In order to ask for a horse, I took 200,000 taels of gold and a horse made of gold, but I couldn't buy it. Xiao Xiao was speechless, why are horses so expensive? Manbao said, sweaty BMW. The man was disappointed when he saw that Manbao knew, but he still clapped his hands and said, yes, it is a bloody BMW, so look, how can this peacock compete with a horse? Manbao nodded, yes, I've only heard of the emperor fighting for horses, but never heard of peacocks fighting. Manbao paid the money to take the horse away. Xiao Xiao looked at the pony a little tangled, it couldn't be ridden, so put it on the carriage. Before he could come up with a solution, Manbao went back and looked at the peacock, but it was no longer on the screen, and was walking around the wooden fence leisurely. Manbao watched for a while, then turned his head and asked Xiao Xiao, could it be that people can still sell officials? Xiao Xiao shook her head, I don't know about this, but since people dare to ask for it, they obviously know that someone is selling it. Manbao nodded and led the horse away. Back in front of the carriage, Xiao Xiao looked at the horse in her hand, and Manbao had already waved, go back by yourself, and give me the medicine box. It's not far from my restaurant. I'll go to my family. When Xiao Xiao heard the words, she took the medicine box to Manbao. Manbao carried the medicine box on his back, holding the pony in his hand and swaying back. Keek was looking for a suitable place along the way. Finally, when he was walking, Keek found it, so he directed Manbao to lead the pony into an alley. After walking for a while, the alley was even smaller. Now, when I went inside, I found that there were high walls on both sides, and there was no door. This is a dead end. She walked forward for a while, and Keek said, it's safe here, and no humans can see it within my scanning range. Manbao squatted down and touched the foal, and let Keek record it together with the rope. The foal disappeared from the ground in an instant. One person and one system waited for a while, there was no sound. Keek said, it seems that the encyclopedia has to count the points. Manbao turned around and went out, saying, how many points do you think it will have? Keek wouldn't do such a subjective thing, so he refused to guess. In the end, Manbao didn't go to Wu Lang and the others, but walked all the way back to Changqing Lane with the medicine box on his back, holding some snacks she bought on the way. From the outer city to the inner city to go home, she was safe all the way. It seems that no one will kill her, otherwise what a good opportunity today. Most of the assassins who had assassinated them before were dead, and the rest were caught by Jingzhou Mansion, and even the 2 assassins who drowned at the bottom of the lake were brought up. It seems that the influence of the king of Yazhu in the capital has been eliminated. Man Bao knocked on the door with the medicine box in his hand, and his face was flushed because he had walked all the way. At this time, only Mr. Zhuang and his brother Xiang were at home. Xiang Chao was bored and was talking to Daji. Xiang Mingxiu borrowed a book to read, but Mr. Zhuang was taking a nap in the sun in the yard. He raised his head when he heard footsteps. Seeing that Man Bao came back, he just glanced at it and asked, "What are you doing here?" Man Bao put the medicine box aside, sat opposite Mr. Zhuang and said, "Sir, I have a question for you." She explained the comparison between Ms. Cheng's attitude towards her today and the past, and then asked, "I am a doctor. No matter in the past or now, Ms. Cheng and I have a doctor-patient relationship." Why did she have a doctor-patient relationship? You were just polite to me, but now you are respecting me? Just because my biological father posthumously presented the state shepherd. Mr. Zhuang sat up from the reclining chair, reached out and patted her head with a smile. "This is not what you want to ask. What you want to ask is, why are doctors weaker than officials?" Man Bao suddenly realized, "It's still very good, sir," I said. "I always feel that the question I asked is not quite right." "That's right. Why is the medical officer inferior to the civil officer and military officer?" See you tomorrow. Good night. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1229. Xiang Mingxiu, who was reading a book in the room, heard the conversation in the courtyard, so he couldn't help putting down his book and looked at the 2 masters and apprentices in the courtyard through the window. Mr. Zhuang lowered his head to meet his disciple's bright eyes, and couldn't help sighing deeply. He thought about walking in the yard, and he also hesitated in his heart, whether it was right for Man Bao to go further and further on the path of studying medicine. Especially after she showed more and more her talent in reading and comprehension of world affairs. But all the hesitation disappeared when the child looked up at the starry sky and made a wish that she would become the most powerful doctor in the world and save the wounded. Mr. Zhuang turned around twice, and after thinking about it, he said, "Man Bao, the 3 of you have lived in Qilai village since you were young, and you don't know much about the outside world, and you have a simpler environment than Bai Shan and Bai Chang. There are some things Mr. never specially taught you, and your family dotes on you, so you haven't felt some things." Man Bao listened carefully. In the outside world, people are divided into 3, 6, and 9. Man Bao nodded and said, "I know, peasants, businessmen, slaves, and sinners." Mr. Zhuang smiled, shook his head slightly and said, "You obviously don't know what you said so easily." Man Bao looked at Mr. Zhuang suspiciously. Mr. Zhuang patted her head and said, "Let's put it this way, people in the world think that witch doctors and musicians are despised by gentlemen. Doctors are among the craftsmen, and they are craftsmen, and their status is still lower than that of businessmen." Man Bao opened his mouth wide, and it took a while to find a reason to refute. "No, there is no official in the business, and our doctor has an official." Mr. Zhuang smiled and nodded, "You're right, so doctors are not registered as other craftsmen and are recruited by the government. You must know that craftsmen are very hard, they must be registered, they often have to do white labor for the public, and sometimes they will be recruited for free when encountering large-scale events. For example, in military service, There are regulations on the number of days that farmers and commoners have to serve each year. Generally, local officials do not and dare not delay for too long. Otherwise, the labor is too hard, and the common people will rise up and attack. What should I do if they start an uprising? But not for the craftsmen. If the roads are to be repaired, the craftsmen will be recruited. If the water conservancy is to be repaired, the craftsmen will be recruited. Some craftsmen are recruited for 2 or 3 years, and some are even dragged to another place. They are constantly seconded, and their family members cannot be found at all. Sometimes they have been away from home for 10 or 20 years when they are released back to their hometowns. Mr. Zhuang said, there are fewer now, but in the past, if there was a big war, there were no doctors in the army, and the army would recruit doctors from local areas to the army. If you join the army, you are a military doctor. You can't just run away. If you run away, you will be a deserter and you will be beheaded. He said, being able to go from a military doctor to the Taiyuan hospital, and from the Taiyuan hospital to return to the hometown for honorable care, there is only one imperial physician fan in several dynasties. Man Bao vaguely understood, so the status of doctors is actually very low. Mr. Zhuang nodded slightly, and you are still a female doctor. In the eyes of the world, your status is lower, but educated people will be more polite to doctors and will not be angry. There are also people who casually draw swords and cut people like the prince, but very few. Ms. Cheng was polite to you before because you are a doctor. If you want to see a doctor for her, you should be more polite and get along well in the future. Mr. Zhuang said, I respect you now. I think one is because you already have an identity. The difference is that although your father is a posthumous gift, he has a righteousness, you have a filial piety, and you can read and read, so you can be a scholar, and you, a loyal minister, are willing to do this thing of saving the dead and the wounded, naturally worthy of respect. Man Bao was thoughtful. So you see, people in this world don't all follow the rules and regulations. There are people in this world who can see clearly like Ms. Cheng Er, and naturally there are people who can't see these things and only recognize the rigid rules in this world. In the future, you will meet more people, all kinds of people. Mr. Zhuang said, these people may recognize you as a scholar, or they may only recognize you as a medic. But no matter how others see you, you are what you are. Man Bao thought for a while and said, I think I am a doctor, and I can be a scholar, but I don't think a doctor is inferior to a doctor. Mr. Zhuang smiled, that's right. He smiled and touched her head, I can barely be considered a scholar as a teacher. Your father and brothers in your family are farmers. In your heart, is there a difference in the status among us? Man Bao shook his head embarrassedly, no. This is the relationship between people and people in the world. The rules are set by people, but in this world, how can scholars only be friends with scholars, farmers only make friends with farmers, and businessmen only make friends with businessmen? Mr. Zhuang said, there will be more people you will meet in the future. Some will have the same attitude towards you from the beginning to the end, and some will continue to change. You don't need to worry about these changes, let alone change yourself because of these changes. The original intention, understand. Man Bao nodded again and again, stick to yourself and don't forget your original intention. Mr. Zhuang nodded approvingly, he liked to teach such disciples, and it was easy to understand. When he talked about it, he simply sat on the chair and talked to her more thoroughly. The distinction between the noble and the lowly in this world is just a rule that some wise people deliberately set to bind the fools who want to gain profits. This is something that has existed since Xia and Shang, and of course our flesh and blood can't change this rule, he said, but our hearts are ours. It's good to keep some things in our hearts. If you don't feel that you are humble, then you are not humble. This is your backbone. Man Bao thought with a small face, digesting the things that her husband taught her today. Xiang Mingxiu in the room was also stunned. He was holding onto the book tightly, and he didn't know how long before he came back to his senses when he heard the sound of hooting outside. When he looked out, he saw Bai Erlang was carrying the book basket rushed into the yard cheering all the way, with Bai Shan following closely behind. Man Bao, who had been thinking about it, was also awakened. She turned her head to look at the two of them and asked, "What are you doing?" Bai Erlang and Bai Shan gave their husband a sloppy salute and rushed to Man Bao together, asking with bright eyes, "Man Bao, where is your horse?" "Man Bao, how do you know?" Bai Shan said, "When we came back, we deliberately stopped at Ji Shitang, and thought you didn't come back, but Xiao Xiao said that you bought a horse and came back by yourself. Where is your horse? Is it in the front yard?" Bai Erlang also looked at her with interest. "Man Bao." She struggled for a while, but she bit the bullet with the bright eyes of the two. "No, the three of them. Would you believe me if I said I gave the pony to someone else?" See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1230. Hearing this, Mr. Zhuang lay back on the reclining chair and watched the two disciples fight their senior sister. Bai Erlang said without thinking, "I don't believe it." Bai Shan looked at her suspiciously, "Could it be that you changed hands and sold it to someone else?" Man Bao looked up at them innocently. Bai Erlang was disappointed. "You really sold the pony to someone else?" "No, what are you trying to do? You spent a long time picking a horse just to sell it to someone else." Bai Shan also felt that this was too unlike her. "Aren't you a liar? People who buy horses don't know how to go to carts and horses to pick horses." Man Bao held his breath and said, "Am I a liar?" Bai Shan and Bai Erlang nodded together, and then discussed by themselves, "You met a bad guy, and he offended you." Bai Shan, "I'm afraid not only a bad person, but also a bit of a stupid bad person. Otherwise, who would buy a horse from you on the street? Even if you don't go to the race course, you should go to the carriage shop to buy it." Even Mr. Zhuang asked, "How much money did you make when you changed hands?" Man Bao sighed sadly, "Why don't you believe in my character?" Bai Shan asked, "Are you saying that you lost or earned your horse if you didn't bring it home?" "Of course, it is earned, and points are still very valuable. Although they cannot be directly exchanged for money in this world, they can buy good things in the mall and realize them in this world." So she said, "I earned it." The three of them had a clear look on their faces, and no longer asked who she sold her horse to, but asked about her trip to the carriage shop today. "Bai Shandao, I also want to buy a horse, so that when I go back to Lujiang County, as long as it's not raining or scorching sun, I'll ride a horse. It's more comfortable than riding a car." Bai Erlang also nodded, "I wanted to buy it for a long time, but you are all busy and no one accompanies me to choose, so it has been delayed until now." Man Bao said, "I saw a particularly good horse today and it asked for 28 gold. Bai Shan was speechless. "So expensive?" Bai Erlang also thought it was expensive. "Isn't there something cheaper?" "There is a 22 gold horse, but I don't think it is as beautiful as it is, and it is not as fast. If Man Bao buys a horse, he must buy the best one he can afford." Her gold was just affordable. Thinking of this, Man Bao looked at Bai Shan, "Do you still have money?" Bai Shandao, "There is still some silver, but it's not enough, but it doesn't matter, I can ask my grandmother for it." Man Bao said, "Is it bad to take money with the elders?" Bai Shan said, "I don't take it now. It will cost a lot of money to buy food and grass for raising horses. I don't make any money now, but I don't have so much cash to bear." He said, "We can only use Xiao Zhuang's income to offset it when we go home, but now that the new wheat seeds are worthless, Xiao Zhuang's income is definitely not as much as in previous years. For the bounty given by the previous assassination, Wu Wulang could only take out 600 taels, and the rest of the Zhou family's share was full of treasures." When Bai Shan saw it, his brain became hot, and they paid for it by themselves. Mrs. Lu received the money from the Zhou family, and of course her own grandson didn't stop him from giving money, so Bai Shan and Man Bao became impoverished. Man Bao still has more than 100 taels of silver left, while Bai Shan has a little more, but didn't he give Man Bao all the gold last night? In this way, among the three, Bai Erlang is currently the richest. Man Bao looked at Bai Erlang. Bai Shan looked at Bai Erlang thoughtfully. When Bai Erlang was seen by the two, he couldn't help but quietly took 2 steps back, and their eyes followed. Bai Erlang looked at the two of them cautiously and said, "You, what do you want to do?" Man Bao coughed lightly and said, "The horse wants to eat beans. It's really expensive to raise a horse, Bai how much money do you have now?" Bai Shan said, "How about I give you an IOU, I will pay you back when I return to Qilai village." Bai Erlang turned around and ran back to the room. "I don't have much money." Bai Shan and Man Bao ran after him, blocking people in the room. Mr. Zhuang was lying on the reclining chair and listening to the two of them negotiate with Bai Erlang to borrow money in the room. He smiled and shook his head, closing his eyes and leaving them alone. Xiang Mingxiu withdrew his gaze and looked down at the book in his hand for a long time without saying a word. He admits that he has read a lot of books and has studied with many teachers, but this is the first time he has heard of what Mr. Zhuang said, and it is the first time he has seen a professor and disciple like Mr. Zhuang. Bai Erlang put away the IOU written by Bai Shan, and then dragged the box out from under the bed and counted the money for him. He also asked Man Bao, "Are you really not going to borrow it?" Man Bao had a toothache. "If you don't borrow it, I'm going crazy. I don't have time to polish your pen." Bai Erlang didn't believe it. "Didn't you say that there are fewer patients now?" Man Bao sighed, "There are fewer patients in Ji Shitang, but there are more patients who need to be seen, and I have a lot to learn recently, and I will continue to experiment with the surgery that only Xiangming learns." Time. Bai Erlang asked Bai Shan while counting the money, how to do the test. Bai Shan said, "You don't understand, why bother yourself, count the money quickly, and rest in 2 days. We will find Feng Zonping to go to the race course to buy horses together." Bai Erlang and Man Bao's attention were immediately diverted, their eyes lit up. "Feng Zonping knows people from the race course. He is always more familiar than us. I heard from my classmates that the horses in the horse farm are better than the carriages and horses." Bai Shan said, "Horses are so expensive, let's just buy one in our lifetime." "Of course, we have to buy a good one." Man Bao and Bai Erlang nodded in agreement. Man Bao said, "Would you like to find a book on Xiangma, and learn how to do Xiangma?" Bai Erlang, "Why don't you study?" Man Bao, "I'm not free." Bai Shan sighed, "Forget it, let me come. Even if I look for books in the past 2 days, I won't learn anything. I will ask Yin or tomorrow. There are generals in his family who understand horses." The three of them couldn't sleep with excitement at the thought that they were about to have their first horse. Whoever did not know Man Bao entered the system and stared at the anthropomorphic model. Seeing that the surgical results were not good, and even worsened, he sighed and recovered with one click. Then she began to treat it with the newly established treatment to get rid of the stagnant water. It takes a certain amount of time for the stagnant water to disappear. Man Bao can only wait for the treatment effect. If it goes well, she can have a second operation in a few days. In the future, she can simply skip the first step and continue to start the trial and error of the second operation until she can perform this operation proficiently. Man Bao still felt a little unaccustomed to being unable to perform surgery, and her eyes couldn't help falling on the female model. She wondered if she could import Xiang Mingxiu's data, but it seemed that there were still differences between men and women. "So I still have to buy a model. See you at 8 p.m.